we have to welcome A.B. Bright to our show. Good morning to you.
A.B. Bright,
good morning.
Former member of Parliament candidate.
You're good?
Yes, for Tema Central. You intentionally said it like that, didn't you?
But you're going to go again,
I
right?
wanted to
no.
whet your
You're not?
appetite a bit.
No.
You're not going to run again
Why?
in 2020?
No.
Were you born by June 4?
Just after.
Oh, just after. Okay. Like
Yeah.
Mama V, just after. No, years after.
Oh,
Relax,
years
don't go
after,
there.
just after.
But A.B., you know,
Yes.
I was, you're speaking today. We're marking June 4. It's actually the 39th anniversary.
Yeah.
And you're one of the speakers at today's events.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, a lot of people look at June 4 and it's, you know, why should we be celebrating a coup, really? And for young people, because you're young, what should we be learning about June 4? Is there anything to learn?
Well, it's interesting that you put it like that. Why should we be celebrating a coup? It's also interesting to note that June 4 has been usually described as an uprising. As opposed to other coups, this is the one that they call the revolution, the revolutionary uprising, and all of this. And I think that it's not possible ordinarily that we would celebrate a coup, and we haven't mentioned any others. But I think that if we put this in the context of the socio-political environment at the time, that's where it becomes relevant to us. Because basically this puts to end a series of palace coups, as they were called. But then in the first place, what was going on in this country that had attained independence in 57, that had attained republic status in 60, and that was ruled by Kwame Nkrumah until 66, when we first had a coup. What conditions, you know, allowed this situation to happen? And those are the things that are relevant for you and I, and those help us to give a background for things like this, the coups and all of that, and then what happened finally on June 4.
So, you know, I'm coming from this point because fast forward from 79 to 81,
Yes.
31st December, and a lot of people actually don't even want to remember. So, you know, you come back after doing something that a lot of people hailed and people were with you. You come back in 1981. So why should we really be looking back there?
Well, interesting that you say a lot of people hailed. This was not going to be popular for everybody. It was popular for the masses. It was popular for, I would say, the mass generality of a country. But of course, there was collateral damage. It would have implications on other people who had been benefiting from the system that was oppressing, you know, the rest of the mass of a country and all of that. And besides, that the situation in the country at that time, the hunger, the hopelessness, and the poverty, is not something that I think that Ghanaians, as we are in our nature, want to remember. This was a time when our generation, for example, have not felt the shame of the Ghanaian identity, where you say you're Ghanaian and immediately the next person looks at you condescendingly because they look at you as a hungry, desperate, hopeless person. We experienced, you know, the generation before us fighting through that pain and finally having this idea of a hero nation for us as Ghanaians. That's what we inherited, this good, wonderful name, Ghana. And so I think that I have a problem. I think that this generation are victims. We're victims of a story that hasn't been properly constructed. We're victims of a story that hasn't been properly communicated. So we don't understand the past, and we don't understand its implications for the future. Out of all of that was born most of the words of our national anthem. You know, make us cherish fearless honesty and help us to resist oppressors' rule. You see, the third verse even says, make us, God bless our homeland Ghana, and make our nation great and strong, bold to defend forever the cause of freedom and of rights. Apparently, this is not how our national anthem started out. But things have happened in this country that precipitated this kind of situations. And as painful as it is, if the generation before us do not tell us how difficult it was for them to feed us, the pain of having to queue for kenke that wasn't cooked, soap and all of those things. I was born in Nigeria. I grew up in Nigeria, my early years. and immediately you say you're Ghanaian, people say, Omo Ghana geisha. Ghana people, they like sardine. Oh, Ghana always buying sardine, because we had to go all the way there to buy geisha and sardine, which were produced in Ghana. They called us hungry people and all of that. But by the time they finish this and your spirit starts to go down, they say, but you people try with that your Rawlings. You know, now Ghana is doing well. Even some of our people are traveling there. You know, so these are the things.
Is this context 79 or this is 81?
This context started, in fact, before 79. You basically have a socio-political system that broken down. And these usually have repercussions, economic repercussions, cultural repercussions. I mean, gradually people were losing faith in the political system. You had civilian rule, you know, before a certain time, I think by Achampong and Akufo and all of that. And they were supposed to have come to arrest the inefficiencies in the democratic dispensation. But they came and it was getting worse. So we'd reached a point where socially it was so broken down that it was hopeless and helpless. Now, what kinds of situations have the masses supporting the military to take over their country, even though the military had failed them? Because the military had taken over and for years had proved that it wasn't up to the task either. But they were still clamoring for the military to take over, and people were crying for blood. This is a situation of desperation, you know, and this is what precipitated all of these things.
But we know that when we fast forward with the current generation, there seems to be a certain discord, certain kind of misconception,
yes,
and perhaps miscommunication. Why do you think that is? And just like other revolutions around the world, how do we do that connection, or perhaps do that synergy between what the present day is, when we know only the Fourth Republic and don't know the past?
Well, it's the disconnection, as you describe it, is born out of fear. We fear things that hurt us. And the people that experienced it usually don't want to go back to those details. But you see, we fail ourselves when we do this. And it's happening with, I think, everything. When things happen in Ghana today, we sensationalize the issue. We talk, you know, we talk about things in terms of the headings, the headlines, and the topics. But we don't look at the interconnectedness of all of this. If we have a breakdown in leadership like this, your economy suffers, basic amenities, infrastructure, everything. It's a breakdown, and gradually you have a social system that cannot work. If we continue to discuss June 4th as something like Rawlings and his people made a coup, you know, who cares really? What was, I mean, the coup happened in a void. And this is the way of thinking that we need to develop as a nation. Even when things happen today, we need to put them in context. The development challenges that we're going through, we need to put them in the context of our social-cultural realities today. And also our history, our past. We've got a lot of things that fight against certain policies and certain moves that we could take. But we do not look at the responsibility of each and every one of us. At the time when these coups happened, it didn't happen without the support of the common man on the streets. It wasn't just an isolated group of individuals. You had people cheering them on. You had people supporting them. You had people praying for them. You had people shielding them. You know, all of these things happen, and as a network, everybody needs to take responsibility for their part in our history in this country.
Now, do you think maybe the situations may not be the same, the times, and if you look at the indicators, may not be the same? Could there be some indicators that could point us to a certain scenario of maybe like situations of an uprising or a revolution among people, maybe not in the same wavelength, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There should always be a revolution. The revolution is ongoing. In that time, by the time this June 4 happened, the structure, the societal structure was such that that was the only recourse, so to speak. But we have a more stable democracy. We've had a sustained democracy. We've had a democracy that's experienced shocks and all kinds of opposition, and it has stood firm. Today, the increased interaction between we and governments, or we and our governance, is very important. Unfortunately, even after all these years of democracy, we have a situation where our relationship with governance as citizens is accusatory, and then their response is defensive. But you see, we built a democracy. I remember just a couple of days ago when we had the lectures, Professor Kwesi Bochwe was saying how they had to implement very, very painful structural adjustments, programs that even his mother, you know, she was ashamed to say, this is my son, because he was spearheading those kinds of initiatives. But the former president, Rawlings, will call him and say, come and explain to this group of people. Come and explain to this group of people what you're doing and why. And so I think that that kind of thing is indicative of the democracy that we need. So today, when we've had the structures, we moved from, you know, military rule into civilian rule. And the structures were basic to support our democracy. But I think that we still have those same basic structures. We've not expanded the opportunities for transparency even more than then. And today, I think that we're even operating below those basic standards that were set. So we need to improve and expand our democracy. We need to increase the democratic process and the participation of the masses, the general public, civil society, and all of this in building a stronger structure so that it's the revolution of the mind when ideas come up, when the system is challenged to do better. The world is moving ahead.
Do you think that young people of today are interested, really? They care about June 4, what happened then?
Unfortunately, they're not. And then I would put the blame back at the generation before who actually experienced it. They're the ones supposed to be more afraid about the possibilities in the future if we have a disorganized society. Today, people speak anyhow to each other. People are always provoking. In the press, there's always, you know, news that carry headlines that drive us in, I would say, crazy directions. And all of these things are dangerous. And if you look at a generation that has seen this country in chaos and disorder, and they're not more afraid than those of us who do not know better, so to speak, then it's worrying, because they should be more afraid than you and I of experiencing that twice in their lifetime. Anything is possible. You know, we feel very comfortable today, but over time, if we do not cherish and take care of the structure that we have, you know, who can tell?
I'll read at least one message or two if we can, and then we have to wrap up because we know that you have to get going. What type of revolution did June 4 achieve? Was it from monarchical rule, or as in monarchy, to constitutional rule as in French Revolution, or from labor intensive to capital intensive as in British Industrial Revolution? The true story of June 4 must be told. It was a military insurrection and insurgency. This military insurrection culminated in executions, torture, and extrajudicial killings. It also introduced kangaroo court system in Ghana. It's from K in Ejuso Bisia. So here's one that says, okay, not related to this. Okay, so on the back of the message that we got,
yes,
you can box that up with what exactly is going to happen, who can be there.
Yeah, well, this is for everybody. It's sad that people feel like it's Rawlings and his supporters, and this is not about Rawlings. I think that Ghanaians generally have to celebrate our history. They have to celebrate the character of us as a people, and that we would always, you know, stand up, be bold for our country. Like I was saying, it's you see, these things do not happen in a void, and then there would always be, you see, when there's corruption, people go hungry, people die from, you know, lack of amenities and facilities and all. That's the collateral damage. Now, when the military takes over, you can't compare it with civilian rule. They have their own rules, and, you know, certain things are abrogated, like the laws and all the constitution. And so those are the circumstances under which these happened. Unfortunately, obviously, we did not have the kind of social interaction system that we have today. And so we couldn't, you know, stop the suffering and the mayhem with our ideas and all of that. The military was the recourse at that time. Today, it's not necessary for us. I believe that we have more options. But then if we do not engage the issues, if we sit down and do not engage in speaking up for the things that are destroying our society, we get to a point where...
Okay, so we have some lineup of activities today?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so today we have the rally at the Medina Social Welfare Park. Yes, and it's bound to be very interesting. This year, like last year, we had a mix of speakers, young and old, so that we can get the youth perspective as well. Because for us, the youth is about today, not about yesterday. Thank you very much for what you did yesterday. We're sorry for all that you went through and all of that, but we want to understand how that relates to us today.
Absolutely.
And so we're looking at the current situation and trying to say, okay, what are the things that we can do to get our voices heard the more? The older ones who went through that are supposed to be able to share some of their pains with us. And hopefully they'll be giving us some advice about how to avoid the pitfalls that led this country to such a breakdown that warranted interventions like June 4th. I'd be speaking, and the General Secretary is going to be there, of the NDC, the chairman of the NDC, and other comrades.
And the founder would speak as well.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we can take that for granted. And I, for one, I'm so anxious to hear. This is somebody who would not allow the truth to be subverted. He's for Ghana, and that's the important thing. I'm sure a lot of NDC people are going to be there. But the important thing is that ultimately, Ghana is what the service is for. Ghana is what it's about. Okay. Your membership of any political party first is predicated upon your being a Ghanaian.
Okay.
So that's the most important thing today.
All
so
right.
everyone is invited.
Okay.
All right.
And it starts at 8.
Thanks for joining.
It's 8 a.m.
Well, yes.
Because it was 10 and then you pushed the time forward.
Yes,
okay.
Because we want to get it done. And
so it means you'll been there from here.
Right.
You have a motorcade to take you there. Lots of traffic, you know.
Motorcade. I'm driving.
You know, it's always a pleasure. We love to talk to you anytime here.
Thank you.
So thank you for passing through.
Thank you very much.
All
God
right,
bless
Abi
you.
Bright.
God bless Ghana.
Stay with us. We pushed Benedict away, but we're bringing him on now. Lots of action. And the first part of our local league as well. Lots of international friendlies to talk about. Benedict is after this.